The HR director smiled when she handed me my termination letter. That was the part I remembered most. Not the words. Not the cold conference room. Not even the way my manager avoided looking at me. It was her smile. A small, confident smile that said she believed she had just made an ordinary business decision. She had no idea she was about to discover that the company she was firing me from had been built partly with my money. My name is Emma Carter, and for 3 years, I had worked at a technology startup called Brightcore. When I joined the company, it was nothing more than a small team working out of 2 rented rooms. We had an ambitious idea, a talented group of engineers, and barely enough money to survive the year. I believed in that idea. So did my father. Before he passed away, he had placed a portion of my family's investment trust into an early-stage funding structure. I wasn't allowed to interfere with the company publicly. The investment was supposed to remain private. My father had always believed that money should create opportunities, not attention. So I joined Brightcore like everyone else. No special title. No family name on my business card. No one knew that part of the company's early funding had come through an investment vehicle connected to my trust. I wanted to earn my place. And for 3 years, I did. I worked late. I solved problems. I helped build the employee systems. I helped recruit engineers. I helped negotiate vendor agreements. I even stayed during a period when several senior employees left. But things changed when Victoria Hayes became HR director. Victoria was polished, intelligent, and extremely ambitious. She knew how to speak to executives. She knew how to make difficult decisions sound reasonable. And she knew exactly how to protect herself. At first, we got along. Then she started changing the company culture. Employees began complaining privately about unfair treatment. Good people were suddenly placed on performance plans. Managers were encouraged to document minor mistakes. People who questioned leadership were labeled difficult. And I started speaking up. That made Victoria uncomfortable. One afternoon, she called me into her office. "Emma, I need you to understand something." I sat across from her. "What?" "You're not in a position to challenge every management decision." "I don't challenge every decision." "You challenge enough of them. If something affects employees unfairly, I think someone should say something." Victoria smiled. "That attitude will eventually hurt your career." I remember looking at her and thinking, maybe. But I also knew something she didn't. My career wasn't dependent on Brightcore. And neither was my future. Still, I didn't expect what happened next. 3 weeks later, Victoria called me into the conference room. My manager was already sitting there. So was someone from legal. Victoria placed an envelope in front of me. "Emma, we've made the decision to terminate your employment." I looked at the envelope. Then at her. "Why?" She gave me the same calm smile. "Your communication style has become disruptive." I almost laughed. "Disruptive?" "Yes." "Because I raised concerns. Because you repeatedly resisted management direction." I looked at my manager. He stared at the table. I looked back at Victoria. "Is this final?" "Yes." I opened the envelope. 3 years. Reduced to 2 pages. My access would be terminated immediately. My company laptop would be collected. My email would be shut down. And I was expected to leave the building within 15 minutes. I stood slowly. "Okay." Victoria looked surprised. "That's all. What else should I do?" She smiled. I expected more resistance. I picked up my bag. "You already made your decision." Then I walked toward the door. Before I left, Victoria said, "Emma." I turned. "I hope you understand this isn't personal." I looked at her for a long moment. No. Then I smiled. I think that's exactly what it is. And I walked away. I had no idea that within 48 hours, Victoria would be sitting in an emergency meeting with the CEO, the board, and the company's investors. And someone would finally ask the question nobody at Brightcore had bothered to ask. Who actually funded this company? 2. The secret behind Brightcore. To understand what happened next, you need to know how Brightcore started. 5 years earlier, the company didn't exist. There was only an idea. My father had been an investor for most of his life. He wasn't famous. He didn't appear on television. He didn't own a giant corporation. But he understood businesses. He knew how to recognize people with good ideas before everyone else noticed them. One evening, he told me about a young engineer named Daniel Reed. Daniel had created a prototype for software that could help small manufacturers predict equipment failures before machines broke down. It was a simple idea, but potentially valuable. My father invested. Then he invested again. And again. Eventually, he helped Daniel turn the prototype into Brightcore. I watched the company grow from a tiny startup into something much larger. But my father had one condition. The investment would be placed through a private trust. My name wouldn't appear in the company's public materials. He didn't want employees thinking I had special treatment. He wanted me to decide whether I could succeed without anyone knowing who I was. So when I eventually joined Brightcore, I didn't tell anyone. Not Daniel. Not Victoria. Not my coworkers. Only the trust's attorney and financial administrator knew. I started in operations. My office was small. My desk was next to the printer. Sometimes I ate lunch at my desk because there wasn't enough room in the break area. I loved it. I wasn't there for the money. I was there because I believed in what we were building. During my first year, Brightcore nearly collapsed. A major client canceled. We had less than 6 months of operating cash. Payroll was becoming a problem. Daniel called an emergency meeting. I sat in the back. He looked exhausted. We need another funding round. Everyone understood what that meant. If we couldn't raise money quickly, people would lose their jobs. I went home that night and called the trust administrator. I want to help. He hesitated. You understand that your father specifically instructed you not to become directly involved. I know. But you can approve additional funding through the trust. I want to. The next morning, Brightcore received an emergency investment. Nobody knew where it came from. Daniel simply told the team, "We're alive." People celebrated. I stayed quiet. That investment helped the company survive. And over the next 2 years, Brightcore grew rapidly. We hired more employees, moved into a bigger building, opened new departments, signed major clients, and eventually, investors began valuing the company at hundreds of millions of dollars. But there was one problem. The more successful Brightcore became, the more aggressive Victoria became. She wanted control. She wanted influence. And she wanted Daniel to trust her. At first, I ignored it. Then I noticed something. Employees who disagreed with Victoria were leaving. Some resigned. Others were terminated. And the reasons always sounded the same. Cultural mismatch. Communication issues. Leadership concerns. Attitude. I recognized the pattern. Victoria wasn't simply managing people. She was removing anyone who might challenge her. I decided to investigate. What I found worried me. 3. The HR files. The first complaint came from a software engineer named Marcus Hill. He had been with Brightcore for almost 4 years. He was brilliant, quiet, reliable. One morning, I found him packing his desk. "Marcus." He looked up. "Hey, Emma. What happened?" He sighed. "I'm leaving." "Why?" He laughed. "Official answer." I nodded. "I'm pursuing other opportunities." "And the real answer?" He looked around before speaking. "Victoria." I frowned. What did she do? She wanted me to approve a performance report on someone I manage. Was the report accurate? No. So you refused? Yes. What happened? I became a problem. He smiled sadly. I've learned that asking questions here is dangerous. That sentence stayed with me. Later that week, I spoke with another employee. Then another. The stories were similar. People were being pressured to change performance reviews. Managers were told to document minor mistakes. Employees were warned not to discuss certain decisions. One person even showed me a message from Victoria. It said, "If you continue questioning this decision, we may need to reconsider whether you're a cultural fit." I stared at the screen. "Did you report this?" "To whom?" I didn't have an answer. That was the problem. Victoria was the HR director. People were supposed to report problems to HR. But what happened when HR was the problem? I decided to speak with Daniel. He was sitting in his office, reviewing financial projections. "Daniel, do you have a minute?" "Of course." I closed the door. "I've been hearing concerns about HR." He looked up. "What kind?" "Employees feel pressured." "By Victoria." "Yes." He leaned back. "Emma, Victoria is tough." "Tough isn't the same as unfair." "What exactly are you suggesting?" I explained what I had heard. Daniel listened. When I finished, he was quiet. "Have you spoken to Victoria?" "Yes." "And?" "She says I'm interfering." Daniel sighed. "I'll talk to her." "Please do." He nodded. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, Victoria called me. She closed the office door. "You've been talking to Daniel?" "Yes." "About HR?" "Yes." "You're making allegations." "I'm reporting employee concerns." "Do you understand how serious that is?" "Yes." She stepped closer. "You're creating unnecessary tension." "I don't think employees should be afraid of HR." She smiled. "Be careful, Emma." "About what?" "Your position." I stared at her. "My position?" "Yes." "Are you threatening me?" "No." She smiled. "I'm advising you." I left her office. That evening, I made copies of everything. Not confidential employee information. Not private records. Only documents showing decisions I had personally been involved in and communications relevant to my own work. I didn't know it then, but that decision would eventually save me. Because Victoria wasn't planning to stop. She was planning to make me disappear. 4. The setup. The first sign came on a Monday morning. I received an email from my manager. Subject, performance concerns. It was strange. I had never received a performance warning before. I opened it. There were 4 complaints. One claimed I had been dismissive during a meeting. Another said I had challenged leadership unnecessarily. A third accused me of creating confusion. The fourth said I had shown a negative attitude. I read them twice. Then I noticed something. None of the complaints included dates. None included specific statements. None had supporting evidence. I replied, "Please provide the specific incidents, dates, and relevant documentation so I can respond accurately." No response. A week later, I received another email. Same accusations. Then another. It became obvious. They were building a file. I went to my manager. Can we talk? He looked nervous. Sure. I closed the door. Why am I suddenly receiving performance complaints? He avoided my eyes. It's just part of the process. What process? Feedback. From whom? He didn't answer. Is Victoria behind this? He sighed. Emma, I don't want trouble. Neither do I. Then just let it go. Let what go? The HR situation. I stared at him. You know this isn't about my performance. He didn't respond. That told me everything. Someone was afraid. And it wasn't me. A few days later, Daniel asked me to meet privately. Emma, I heard you're having problems with HR. Yes. I want you to know I don't have concerns about your work. Thank you. But Victoria says you're becoming disruptive. I know. Can you work this out with her? I've tried. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Then try again. I nodded. But when I walked out of his office, I knew something had changed. Daniel wasn't protecting me. He wasn't attacking me either. He was avoiding the conflict. And that made Victoria more powerful. 2 weeks later, I received the termination meeting invitation. I knew immediately. They had already decided. The complaints had been a paper trail. The meetings had been preparation. The decision had probably been made weeks earlier. So when Victoria handed me the envelope, I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was how little I felt. I had already accepted that the company I loved wasn't the company I had joined. I walked out, and I thought that was the end. Then my trust administrator called. Emma, we need to talk. About what? Brightcore. My heart sank. What happened? He paused. The company is preparing another funding round. I know. You need to understand something. What? The financing structure has changed. How? You're no longer just a passive beneficiary. I froze. What does that mean? It means your trust has voting rights attached to its preferred shares. I sat down. How many? He gave me the number. I stared at the wall. It was far more than I had expected. Then he said, and there's another issue. What? The board is considering a major restructuring. What kind? They may issue additional shares. Why? To raise capital. I suddenly understood. If they issued enough new shares, my trust's influence could be diluted. Unless I acted. But I didn't want to act because I had been fired. I wanted to act because the company was making decisions that could affect my investment. That was different. And I had one more thing to learn. Victoria wasn't just trying to fire me. She was trying to position herself to control the company. 5. The trust is revealed. 2 days after my termination, I received an invitation. Not from HR. From the company's board secretary. It was for a special shareholder meeting. I stared at the email. Why would I receive it? Then I saw the attachment. Shareholder notice. My trust was listed as a preferred shareholder. I had always known the trust owned shares. I hadn't realized how significant the position had become. I called the trust administrator. Did Brightcore know about this? Certain board members did. Who? The CEO and outside counsel. Does Victoria know? We don't know. I sat quietly. Then I asked, what happens if I vote? That depends on the resolution. What resolutions? Leadership restructuring, new financing, board appointments. I read the document again. Then I saw Victoria's name. She was being proposed for a new executive role. Chief People and Strategy Officer. A role that would give her influence far beyond HR. That was when I understood. The termination wasn't simply about me. Victoria was building a power structure. She had removed employees who challenged her. She had weakened internal opposition. She had convinced Daniel that conflict was bad. And now she wanted more authority. I didn't know whether she understood the trust's voting rights, but I suspected she didn't. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. I attended. When I walked into the boardroom, several people looked shocked. Victoria was there. Her face changed immediately. Emma. I smiled. Hello, Victoria. She looked at Daniel. Then the board secretary. Why is she here? The secretary answered calmly. She is representing a significant shareholder. Victoria's expression froze. Daniel looked at me. Emma. I took my seat. I believe we have a meeting. The board chair cleared his throat. Yes. The meeting began. The first resolution concerned financing. The second concerned board appointments. The third concerned Victoria's expanded role. Then the chair asked, "Does the shareholder wish to vote?" I stood. Yes. Victoria stared at me. How? The chair looked at her. She has voting rights. Victoria shook her head. But she was an employee. The chair answered. Employment status has nothing to do with share ownership. Silence. I cast my votes. The financing resolution passed. The board appointment resolution passed. Then came Victoria's appointment. I voted against it. So did several other shareholders. The resolution failed. Victoria looked stunned. She turned toward me. You planned this. I shook my head. No. Then why are you doing this? Because I'm a shareholder. You're angry because I fired you. I looked at her. No. Then what is this? Accountability. Her face went pale. For the first time, I saw something I had never seen in Victoria before. Fear. 6. The evidence nobody expected. The shareholder meeting should have ended there. But before we left, the board chair asked me to stay. Emma, there's something you need to see. He handed me a folder. Inside were documents related to the company's internal HR practices. My name appeared several times. So did Victoria's. I read through them. Then I found something disturbing. One of the complaints used to justify my termination had been edited. The original message was different. The final version had removed important context. Another complaint had been written by a manager who later admitted he had been pressured to submit it. Then I found an internal email. Victoria had written, "We need sufficient documentation before proceeding with Emma's termination." The date was 6 weeks before my supposed performance concerns began. I stared at the screen. They had planned it. The board chair looked at me. We are investigating. Why? Because we now have evidence that HR may have manipulated internal processes. I closed the folder. What do you need from me? Your records. I'll provide what I have. The investigation lasted 3 months. It uncovered more than anyone expected. Several employees had been pressured. Performance documentation had been selectively created. Some managers had been instructed to avoid putting concerns in writing. A few employees had been terminated after refusing to support questionable decisions. And Victoria had created a culture where disagreement was treated as disloyalty. But then the investigators found something even bigger. Financial records. Certain recruiting vendors had relationships with people close to Victoria. Payments had been approved without normal review. Nothing conclusively proved criminal wrongdoing. But there were serious conflicts of interest. The board demanded answers. Victoria denied everything. She said she had acted in the company's best interest. She said employees were exaggerating. She said the investigation was retaliation. Then the board asked her one question. Why did you terminate Emma Carter before completing the normal review process? She couldn't answer. Because there was an email. Her own email. The one saying they needed documentation first. The board had proof that the documentation came afterward. Her story collapsed. Victoria was placed on administrative leave. Then she resigned. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell anyone. Because by then, something had become very clear. I didn't need revenge. The truth was doing the work for me. 7. The startup starts falling apart. Brightcore survived the scandal. But barely. Investors became nervous. 2 executives resigned. Several employees left. A major client delayed renewal. The company needed stability. Daniel called me. I need your help. I was surprised. With what? Leadership. I laughed softly. You're asking the woman you fired to help fix the company. I know how that sounds. It sounds strange. I deserve that. I didn't respond. He continued. I made mistakes. Yes. I trusted the wrong person. Yes. I didn't listen to employees. Yes. He sighed. Can you help us? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no. But Brightcore wasn't Victoria. It wasn't Daniel. It was also the employees who still worked there. The engineers. The assistants. The people who had believed in the original mission. So I agreed to help. But I had conditions. No executive position. Okay. No reporting to you. Okay. I work independently. Fine. Full access to relevant documents. Yes. And no special treatment because of my investment. Daniel paused. Agreed. I returned as an outside advisor. Not as an employee. The first thing I did was meet the employees. I asked one question. What needs to change? People talked for hours. They wanted transparent performance reviews. Independent HR reporting. Clear promotion criteria. Anonymous reporting channels. Management training. And most importantly, they wanted leadership to listen. I wrote a complete restructuring plan. The board approved it. Within 6 months, employee turnover dropped. Productivity improved. People started speaking openly again. Brightcore began recovering. And then something unexpected happened. The company received a new investment offer. A large investment firm wanted to buy a major stake. The offer valued Brightcore at nearly twice what it had been worth when I first joined. The board was excited. But I wasn't. I read the proposal. Then I noticed a clause. The investor wanted significant control over future board appointments. I warned the board. This could create another concentration of power. One board member asked, "Are you saying we should reject the money?" No. Then what are you saying? Negotiate. So we did. The final agreement gave the investor less control and stronger protections for existing shareholders. My trust remained protected. The company received the capital it needed. And Brightcore continued growing. 8. The conversation with Daniel. One evening, Daniel and I stayed late at the office. The building was almost empty. He looked at me. I've been meaning to ask you something. What? Why didn't you tell me who you were? I knew exactly what he meant. Why didn't you tell me your trust funded Brightcore? I smiled. My father wanted me to earn my place. Did he know you worked here? Yes. He never told me. That was the point. Daniel laughed. I spent 3 years wondering why you were so good at understanding the business. I worked hard. I know. He looked down. I owe you an apology. For what? Not believing you. I was quiet. He continued. When Victoria said you were difficult, I believed her. Why? Because she made everything sound reasonable. I nodded. That was her talent. Daniel looked at me. Did you ever hate me? I thought about it. No. Why not? Because I was disappointed. What's the difference? Hate keeps you attached. He smiled. That's deep. It's true. He looked around the office. This company wouldn't exist without your family. I shook my head. No. What? The company exists because people built it. But your trust gave us the money. Money gave you time. I looked at the engineers' offices. People created the value. Daniel nodded. Then he asked, would your father be proud? I smiled. I think he'd be proud that I didn't use his money to become entitled. Daniel laughed. He definitely would. We sat in silence. Then he said, you know what the strangest part is? What? The person who tried to remove you ended up proving exactly why you were valuable. I smiled. Life is strange. 9. The woman who lost everything she wanted. Months later, I heard about Victoria. She had tried to join another startup. The company conducted a background review. She wasn't hired. She tried another. Same result. Eventually, she started consulting. I didn't follow her career. I didn't care. Then one afternoon, she sent me an email. It contained only one sentence. I never thought you'd come back. I didn't respond. A second email arrived. You won. I still didn't respond. Then a third. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I considered replying. Then I deleted the emails. Not because I was angry. Because there was nothing left to say. She had wanted power. She had wanted control. She had wanted to remove anyone who could challenge her. But power built on fear doesn't last. Eventually, people stop trusting you. And once trust disappears, titles don't matter. Victoria had learned that lesson. I didn't need to teach it to her. 10. The employee who changed my mind. One of the most meaningful moments happened months later. A young employee named Sarah approached me. She had joined Brightcore after the restructuring. Can I talk to you? Of course. She sat down. I heard about what happened. I smiled. Which part? She laughed. All of it. What do you want to know? She looked nervous. Were you scared? I thought about the question. When? When you were fired. Yes. She looked surprised. You don't seem like someone who gets scared. Everyone gets scared. What did you do? I made sure fear didn't make my decisions. She nodded. Then she asked, do you think you got revenge? I smiled. No. Really? No. Why? Because revenge wasn't the goal. What was? Doing what was right. She looked thoughtful. Then she said, I think that's harder. It is. She smiled. I'm glad you came back. I looked around the office. So am I. 11. The boardroom moment. A year later, Brightcore held its annual shareholder meeting. The company was profitable. The employee count had nearly tripled. The product had expanded internationally. The company had survived the crisis. And my trust had become one of the largest long-term shareholders. I sat quietly during the meeting. When the financial report was presented, the board chair said, we owe a great deal to the people who stayed when the company was struggling. He paused. And to those who were willing to tell us when we were wrong. He looked directly at me. I smiled. The meeting continued. Then came the shareholder questions. One investor stood. "I have a question about governance." He asked how the company had changed after the HR investigation. The board chair answered. Then the investor asked, "What guarantees do you have that something like this won't happen again?" The chair said, "We don't have guarantees." Everyone became quiet. He continued, "But we have systems, independent oversight, transparent processes, employee reporting, board accountability, clear conflicts of interest rules, and shareholder protections." That was the right answer. No company can promise that people will never make mistakes, but good companies can make it harder for mistakes to become disasters. After the meeting, I walked through the lobby. I stopped beside the wall where old photographs of Brightcore's early days were displayed. There was one photograph I hadn't seen before. It showed the original team. Daniel, the engineers, the first employees, and me. I stared at it. I had almost forgotten that version of myself. The woman who believed in an idea before it was valuable. The woman who didn't need a title. The woman who just wanted to help build something meaningful. I smiled. Then I kept walking. 12. The real value of the trust fund. People sometimes hear the words, trust fund, and assume the story is about money. It isn't. Yes, my trust gave me financial security. It gave Brightcore early capital. It gave me the freedom to walk away from a bad situation. But money alone couldn't fix what happened. Money couldn't restore trust. Money couldn't make employees feel safe. Money couldn't create a good culture. And money couldn't force people to tell the truth. The real value of my trust was something different. It gave me the ability to make decisions without desperation. When Victoria fired me, I didn't have to beg for my job. I didn't have to accept humiliation because I needed the paycheck. I could walk away. That freedom mattered. But I also understood that not everyone has it. That's why I became more careful about how I used my position. I didn't want to become another person who believed money gave them the right to control everyone else. My father's greatest lesson wasn't about wealth. It was about responsibility. He used to tell me, "Money can open a door. Character determines what you do after you walk through it." I finally understood what he meant. 13. The startup's biggest decision. 3 years after the incident, Brightcore faced its biggest decision yet. A large corporation offered to acquire the company. The offer was enormous. Employees would receive shares. Investors would make significant returns. The board was excited. But the acquisition would also mean major changes. Some employees would probably lose their roles. The company culture could disappear. Daniel asked for my opinion. "What do you think?" I looked at the offer. "I think you need to decide what Brightcore is worth." "Financially?" "No." He looked at me. "Then what?" "Personally." "What do you mean? What do you want this company to become?" He was quiet. I continued. "If you sell, nobody can blame you." "I know. But don't sell because you're tired." He nodded. "Why not?" "Because exhaustion makes bad decisions look attractive." He smiled. "That sounds like something you'd say." "It is." The board spent weeks discussing the offer. Eventually, they declined. Instead, they raised another round of funding. Brightcore remained independent. The company grew again. And the employees who had stayed through the crisis became some of its most important leaders. I was proud of them. Not because of the money. Because they had rebuilt something that could have disappeared. 14. The final meeting with Victoria. I never expected to see Victoria again. Then, almost 4 years after my termination, I saw her at a business conference. We were both attending different panels. She noticed me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she approached. Emma. Victoria. She looked nervous. I wanted to apologize properly. I nodded. I hear you. No, I mean it. She took a breath. I was wrong. I waited. I thought if I controlled the people around me, I could control the company. She looked down. I was afraid of losing influence. And you thought I was a threat. Yes. Why? Because you didn't need me. That answer surprised me. She continued. You weren't afraid of me. I said nothing. And that made me uncomfortable. I looked at her. Why? Because everyone else was. I understood. She had built her power around fear. I had built mine around independence. Those two things could never coexist peacefully. She asked, Do you hate me? No. She looked surprised. Why? Because I don't want to spend my life carrying what happened. She nodded. I wish I had understood that earlier. I wish you had too. She gave me a small smile. Are we okay? I thought about it. We're not friends. She laughed softly. I understand. But I don't want anything bad to happen to you. She nodded. Thank you. We shook hands. Then we went our separate ways. And this time, I knew there truly was nothing left between us. 15. What happened after I left? The most surprising part of my story wasn't what happened to Victoria. It was what happened to me. After leaving Brightcore, I started investing in small businesses. Not just with money. With knowledge. I helped founders understand hearing. Contracts. Operations. Governance. Risk. I became an advisor to several startups. Eventually, I created a small investment program through my trust. The purpose was simple. Help promising founders without allowing money to become control. Every investment included governance protections, employee safeguards, transparent reporting, clear conflict of interest rules. I wanted to invest in companies where people could disagree without being punished. Because I had learned how dangerous a workplace becomes when everyone is afraid to speak. One founder asked me, Why are you so focused on employee protection? I told him, Because I've seen what happens when nobody can say no. He nodded. That bad? Yes. What's the worst thing that happened? I thought about Victoria. Then I answered. The company stopped hearing the truth. That was the real danger. Not the termination. Not the scandal. Not the lost employees. The real danger was that leadership had created an environment where people were afraid to tell the truth. And once a company stops hearing the truth, problems don't disappear. They grow quietly. 16. The email that started everything. Years later, I found the original termination email. It was still saved in an old archive. I opened it. The subject line read, Employment termination, Emma Carter. I read the words again. You have demonstrated an ongoing pattern of behavior inconsistent with company expectations. I stopped reading. Then I laughed. Not because the email was funny. Because I remembered how powerful it had felt that day. I thought those words were closing a door. They weren't. They were opening one. That email pushed me to understand my ownership. It pushed the board to investigate. It exposed problems. It changed Brightcore's culture. And it changed my career. Sometimes, we spend years trying to avoid difficult moments. But sometimes, the difficult moment is exactly what forces us to become the person we were capable of becoming. I saved the email. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. Words have power. People can label you. They can misunderstand you. They can try to reduce you to a story that makes them comfortable. But you don't have to accept their version. You get to write your own. 17. The lesson I took from it. If you've ever been fired unfairly, I know what you're probably thinking. You want people to regret it. You want them to realize what they lost. You want the manager who hurt you to see you succeed. I understand that feeling. I felt it too. But here's what I learned. If your entire definition of success is proving someone wrong, then they still control you. Because you're still living according to their decision. Real freedom comes when you stop asking, will they regret losing me? And start asking, what do I want to build now? That question changed my life. Victoria's opinion stopped mattering. The termination letter stopped mattering. The embarrassment stopped mattering. What mattered was what came next. I built relationships. I built investments. I built businesses. I built a reputation. And I built a life where my future didn't depend on whether someone in an office thought I was difficult. That's the kind of revenge nobody can take away. 18. The woman they thought they could remove. When Victoria fired me, she believed she was removing one employee. She wasn't. She was removing a shareholder, an investor, a problem solver, a person who understood the company. And most importantly, she was removing someone who refused to stay silent. But the irony is that I never used my ownership to punish her. I used it to protect the company. I voted. I documented. I advised. I negotiated. And when it was necessary, I walked away. That was the difference. I had power, but I didn't need to prove it. When people discover they have power, they often make one mistake. They start using it because they can. I learned something different. The strongest person in the room isn't always the person who uses the most power. Sometimes it's the person who has the power to destroy everything and chooses to build instead. That was the lesson I carried from Brightcore, and it's the lesson I still carry today. 19. The final letter. 5 years after my termination, Daniel sent me another letter. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was a thank you. He wrote, Emma, when we first met, you were just another employee who believed in our idea. Then you became one of the people who helped save the company. Then you became one of our most important shareholders. But none of that is what I remember most. I remember the day you were fired. You walked out without shouting. You didn't threaten anyone. You didn't beg. You simply left. And somehow, that was the strongest thing you could have done. Because you knew your value didn't disappear when we stopped recognizing it. I closed the letter. That sentence stayed with me. Your value doesn't disappear when someone stops recognizing it. That was the truth I had needed on the day I was fired. And maybe it's the truth someone watching this story needs today. 20. The ending nobody expected. People often imagine revenge stories ending with the villain losing everything. That's not how my story ended. Victoria lost her position. Brightcore lost millions in potential value during the crisis. Several people lost their jobs. There were painful consequences. But the company survived. Employees rebuilt their careers. Investors recovered. And I built a life beyond the company. The ending wasn't destruction. It was transformation. That is why I don't call this a revenge story. I call it a story about what happens when someone underestimates the person they thought they could remove. Victoria thought she was ending my career. She was actually ending my dependence on Brightcore. She thought she was taking away my power. She was actually forcing me to discover how much power I already had. She thought the trust fund made me privileged. But the trust wasn't what made me successful. It simply gave me a safety net. My work created my reputation. My choices created my future. And my character determined what I did with the opportunities I had. So if there is one thing I want you to remember from this story, let it be this. Never let someone else's rejection become your identity. If they fire you, you can rebuild. If they underestimate you, you can grow. If they betray you, you can walk away. And if someone tries to convince you that you're worthless because they no longer need you, remember that their decision does not define your value. I left Brightcore with a box of personal belongings. A laptop was taken from me. My email was shut down. My office disappeared. My title was gone. For a few minutes, I felt like I had lost everything. But I hadn't. I still had my knowledge, my integrity, my experience, my relationships, my courage, and I still had the ability to choose what came next. That was enough. More than enough. Years later, I walked through the same building where Victoria had once fired me. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked for my badge. Nobody questioned why I was there. I wasn't an employee anymore. I didn't need to be. I had become something else. An investor. An advisor. A founder. A partner. A person who could walk into a room without needing permission to know her own worth. And as I stood in that lobby, I remembered Victoria's words. This isn't personal. I smiled. Maybe she was right. Maybe the termination wasn't personal. Maybe it was simply a decision. But what happened afterward? That was my choice. I could have spent years trying to make them regret firing me. Instead, I built something they couldn't take away. And that became the greatest victory of all. 21. Final moral: your value is bigger than one job. If someone has ever made you feel replaceable, remember this. A job is a position. It is not your identity. A title can disappear. A company can change. A manager can turn against you. A paycheck can stop. But your skills remain. Your experience remains. Your lessons remain. And your ability to start again remains. Don't let one person's opinion become the ceiling over your life. And don't confuse revenge with success. Real success is being able to look back without needing anything from the people who hurt you. That's where I eventually arrived. I didn't need Victoria to apologize. I didn't need Daniel to praise me. I didn't need Brightcore to admit I was right. I already knew. And once I knew my own value, their approval became unnecessary. The HR director thought she was terminating an employee. She didn't know she was terminating one of the company's most important shareholders. She thought she was removing a problem. She didn't realize she was about to expose the biggest problems inside the company. And she certainly didn't expect the woman she fired to become one of the people helping rebuild the company afterward. But that's life. Sometimes the door that closes is the door you needed to stop standing behind. Sometimes rejection is redirection. And sometimes the person who thinks they're taking away your future is unknowingly pushing you toward it. So if you're going through something similar right now, don't waste your energy trying to make them sorry. Don't spend your nights imagining their regret. Don't let anger become your permanent home. Take the lesson. Protect your dignity. Document the truth. Walk away when you need to. And then build. Build something they never expected. Build something that belongs to you. Build something so meaningful that one day you'll look back at the moment you thought your life was falling apart. And realize it was actually the moment your real life began. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't making them regret firing you. It's becoming someone they could never control again. The end.